What's up, y'all? You're listening to the Extra Point College Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Carnes, joined as always by my co-host, Daniel Hammock. Daniel, we've got a packed show tonight. It's time to make our national picks. So here's a rundown of everything we're going to talk about. We're going to first talk about what teams can win the national championship. Then we're going to go into our college football playoff picks for this preseason, the rest of our New Year's Six Bowls based on how we think the season's going to play out. Our national champion, we're going to pick a national champion for the 2021 season on the podcast right here in this episode. We'll talk Coach of the Year and Heisman. So big episode, Daniel. Finally, national picks. And then next time we meet, we're talking real games for week one.
Yeah, and honestly, this is the type of show that is amplified by being able to look at the graphics that we have that we put out there. So the best way to do that is to go on social media, on Facebook and Instagram, follow us at the Extra Point Pod, and then on YouTube. That way you can just see everything we're doing. Follow us on Twitter. We'll probably post it there as well at Deep South Daniel and at Jacob Carnes. But we definitely want you guys to be connected and see, all these graphics for the New Year's Six, because they're going to be fun to talk about. But when you look at all the matchups and see all their colors and all this kind of stuff, it just kind of makes it more real. Same with the playoff picks and everything like that. So if you're not following, I don't know why you're not, but go do it now.
I'm looking at the graphic right now. And if I do say so myself, I think it looks pretty good.
Oh, yeah. It definitely pops.
It pops. So, Daniel, let's dive in. We got a lot to talk about. So before we get to our playoff picks, our national championship pick, this is a question that I think is always very intriguing going into the season. And that is, how many teams actually have a chance to win the national championship? What teams have the tools this year to win the national championship? And we haven't talked about this yet. And so let's start here. How many teams do you have?
7.
I have 8, potentially 9 that you could maybe talk me into. So we're right on the same number. Daniel, go ahead and run down your list. And then I'd love to hear what went into picking these teams.
So to start with, before I even do it, when you say who can, you could just default to the Bud Elliott, blue chip ratio, which if you're greater than 50% blue chip ratio, which is the amount of 4 and 5 stars on your roster in any given year, that, you could just pick, 1 through 15 of those teams or however many teams are on that list. I do think there's a little bit of a different dynamic because you have to look at upperclassmen. You've got to look at who are your leaders, things like that. So I've got 7 teams, and this is just, I think, 7 teams with the ceiling of a national championship this season. This doesn't mean year over year. One year, they're going to be different each year. So Alabama every year. So Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Georgia, Oklahoma, LSU, and Texas A&M. So those are my schools this year.
All right. I have all of those. And I wrote mine down in order. So you knocked off the top. You said 7, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are my top 7. I have 1 for sure more. I can be talked into 2. All right. My next one is USC.
Okay. Of course.
Of course. Go Trojans. Fight on. The other one is Miami.
Yes.
Which I knew you'd appreciate. So you talk to me first. What went into picking these teams outside of the BCR blue chip ratio, which I also used? I used 3 other things, and you might have used the same things. It's something we talked about in the podcast a lot this offseason, actually.
Yeah. So obviously it's important. It's important who your best players are and what positions they play. So you're going to get a plus point for me if one of your best players is your quarterback, if one of your best players is a receiver, or if one of your best players is a pass rusher. And if those are your 3 best players, then you're probably one of these top teams. So A&M is last on my list because I don't know exactly what they have in Haynes King. I do think it's an improvement over what they had last year in Kellen Mond. I do think they have one of the best defensive lines led by McKinley Jackson. I do think that, obviously Isaiah Spiller, and then at running back, and then I think that they've got a couple of receivers. LSU, I mean, Keishon Butte could be the very next Jamar Chase. Like, he could be that guy, that dude. I think Max Johnson's a good quarterback. We'll see if he's going to be a great quarterback or not, but he's got pedigree. His dad was Super Bowl winning quarterback. So those guys are important. And LSU, I mean, BJ Ojolari, returning sack leader in the SEC. So that's important to have that guy off the edge. They obviously have Derek Stingley in the defensive backfield. So you've got some components there where you can really work with. Oklahoma, Nick Bonito, a defensive end. I think he's very strong. Obviously, Spencer Rattler is going to talk about him at quarterback. And then they've got like 5 receivers. But, that's where I'm going to be with Oklahoma. They're strong. They've got my favorite running back this year in Kennedy Brooks. I think he's going to really have a great year. Georgia, I think they have either the first or second best defensive line in the country. So kind of everybody playing that role. Adam Anderson's probably going to be the sack leader there. I think Georgia has a deep receiving core. If they had George Pickens, which they might towards the end of the season, who knows? He's still practicing with the team and he's still working out and everything. So he hasn't quite left yet. NIL could prove to him still make a little bit of money and still stay playing. I don't know. Obviously, JT Daniels is going to be talked about heavily. Georgia's just deeply talented everywhere. Even if they lose anything, they've got a lot of talent. Ohio State, you were talking about this interesting last time with their wide receiving core. It's not only that they're the best, it's that there's such a large gap between number 1 and number 2 in the country that it's very noticeable. Like, Ohio State is the best, and it's tough to put someone close with them. Like, it's them and then everybody else. So wide receiver, obviously CJ Stroud, we expect a lot of him, but if he didn't work out, there's three other guys that were 5 stars that can step in that role. And then just defensively, they're gonna always have dudes. So Ohio State's kind of got that pedigree. Clemson's the other team that I was talking about as far as top defensive line. They're number 1 or number 2, depending upon how the season plays out. Georgia's got a little more upperclassmen talent. Clemson's got a little more underclassmen talent, but we'll see kind of how that manifests itself over this season. Obviously, DJ is great at quarterback, DJ Uiagalelei, but, they literally have nobody behind him as far as scholarship quarterbacks. So that worries me. If Justin Ross is the Justin Ross we saw in 2019 or 2018, I guess it was 2019 when he's a freshman, that's going to be huge. 5-star, take the top off the defense, but he just got cleared. Might be towards the end of the season before you see that manifest itself. So can the rest of the receiving core step up? I don't think that they're quite as good as some people say they are. And then, Alabama is Alabama. So first and foremost, they're going to have that Saban, stamp of approval no matter what. And then, they follow up greatest team ever with like the greatest recruiting class ever, and add on to that, like the top 2 transfers or 2 transfers that are going to start for them, which is amazing. So Jamison Williams is wide receiver and Henry To'o at linebacker. So, I mean, I'm high on Bryce Young. It's another guy that's got to stay healthy because I don't think that they have quite that, ability behind him if that was to happen. So, that's kind of how I look at things is those 3 key positions.
Yeah, I wrote down the same 3 key positions. Barton Simmons, a 24/7 Sport, formerly a 24/7 Sports, now the general manager of Vanderbilt football.
Commodores.
That's right. So he used to write an article every year in the offseason that was, of the contenders, do you have a fighter pilot or a bus driver at quarterback? And so that was a column for me, was, do these teams have a fighter pilot at quarterback? That first column was blue chip ratio. If you're not above that threshold, automatically crossed off the list. Fighter pilot at quarterback, elite wide receiver core, like great to elite wide receiver core, and then great to elite defensive line. Can you get pressure with your defensive line? Because with today's college football's offenses, like, you have to be able to get pressure with 3 or 4 because you got to play so many guys in the secondary, covering receivers. So all the teams on this list check that box. My question being Miami is, and I actually texted you this, it's buying some potential with their defensive line because they did lose some first-round pass rushers. And then the receiver core. They're young in both spots, but they've recruited well at both spots. And so that's my like gray area team is Miami. I think they could have the tools to do it this year. So I'll leave on my list and say Miami. And then, everything you said with those teams. And then USC, again, they check all those boxes, fighter pilot at quarterback, and they've got a fighter pilot backup. Receiving core being elite, and you've got like a top guy as a star. And then they're going to have a great pass rush. And they're going to play some young guys. Corey Foreman, former number 1 player in the country, going to be a part of that pass rush. Drake Jackson going to be a part of that pass rush. So I love that. You're saying 7 teams. I'm saying 9. I guarantee you it will be one of those 7, though, that you said. It's going to win the national championship. So speaking of the national championship, let's start to have this conversation. The college football playoff. Now, we're going to talk about a lot of games all season. We don't want to make this show just for the playoff, but everyone's getting their picks out this time of year, right? Who's going to make the playoff? So we've got our 4. And, based on our last episode, our conference champions, this should come as no surprise, but the 4 we have are Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama, and Oklahoma. So, Daniel, just give me your thoughts on our 4, how we picked them, why we picked them. And once again, this will be the 8th year of the college football playoff. This will be the 8th different combination of teams. So no 4 teams have ever made the same playoff.
And this would be the first time that the ACC would not be represented.
Clemson missed the first playoff, but Florida State was in it.
Florida State was
right.
there.
Yep.
So Florida State was there, and then it's been Clemson ever since. So that's the biggest shock. Of course, that is where we have our biggest, if you want to call it a hot take, if you want to call it a, leap of faith, whatever, we have Clemson, or we have Miami winning that ACC championship. So kind of knocking them out of contention for the playoff, and Alabama, who always has that cachet of if they either lose the championship game or don't even play in the championship game, they're the ones that have made it in both the BCS and the playoff. So we have them. Oklahoma, this feels different for Oklahoma. Like they've been number 4 before a lot, and they've been number 3 before. And there's been times where they just felt like they haven't quite belonged with the rest of the group, usually because of that defense. So that's the biggest thing for me is I look at this and I don't feel like there's 3 good teams and 1 so-so team. I think these are 4, if you want to call them complete teams. I would say these are the 4 most complete teams this season.
Agreed.
And I think that the interesting part is 3 of these 4 all could sustain an injury to quarterback and still probably make it, depending upon, like how the rest of the schedule lines up. Because I think that 3 of these 4 all have backups with the ceiling of a national championship as well. So, and Bama is the only one I don't have
Bama.
that, which it's still Bama and it's still got Saban. Right. So even if they didn't have it, their coach has that ceiling, so they can do what they need to do if that's the case.
Yeah, you stole my first bullet point. I just wrote these would be the 4 most complete teams this year. And they will be. I mean, top to bottom, recruited at an elite level. And Oklahoma has really gained ground in recruiting the past several seasons. The fact that their defense, like you mentioned, will be another year into Alex Grinch's system and improved to match that elite offense. They're going to look like Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, like that have been there and had elite offenses and a really good defense to match. Oklahoma's going to look like that this year. This is different. I don't think there's a significant gap between any of these 4 teams. Honestly, within the teams we have in our top 6, I don't think there's a significant gap with those teams in our top 6, and that would include Clemson and Texas A&M. So these are the 4 most complete teams, and this would make for some fun matchups. So let's go ahead and talk New Year's 6 bowls. So We do have Georgia and Oklahoma in the Orange Bowl, which will be one of these college football playoff semifinal games. Ohio State and Alabama in the Cotton Bowl. Again, another college football playoff semifinal. Daniel, we have some other fun matchups for these New Year's Six Bowls I want to talk through. Why don't you talk through our first one? And it's the Sugar Bowl. And this is an SEC and a Big 12 game. So we had some fun with this given our predicted records with where we think each team's going to finish. Given some of the bowls tie-ins, that's how we got our matchups. So we had a little bit of fun. Talk me through our Sugar Bowl matchup.
Yeah, so this is probably the most fun. This is definitely the one we kind of paired together, but in light of recent events, we decided, hey, this is a Big 12 SEC matchup. So we figured we might as well throw it back to, two teams that used to be in the Big 12 and two teams that will eventually be in the SEC. So Texas A&M and Texas. We went ahead and did it. Had to. We think Texas A&M is going to be one of these teams that's right there as far as within shouting distance of the playoff. We think Texas will be very glad to be here because they will have pretty well overachieved what most of the people expect of them. This is kind of right where everybody expects Texas A&M to be. So from that scope, but yeah, just an absolutely fun game, kind of a precursor to Texas joining the SEC and then thus putting these two hated rivals in the same conference again. Definitely a fun litmus test to see how far they've come since they last played each other, in when was it, 2011, I'm guessing.
Yeah, but both fan bases have been talking about how they don't care about the rivalry, and they're arguing over who doesn't care about it more.
Yeah, we know what's going on.
We know. So this will be really fun to. In the last decade, both fan bases have argued who's been better. I mean, it's been A&M who's been better, but this will be a fun game to finally get it back on the field, and hopefully we'll get it again as a yearly matchup soon in the SEC. I'll take us to our next one. How about the Peach Bowl? So typically an ACC SEC matchup or at large bids, but luckily we got an ACC SEC matchup given our team. So Clemson and LSU. And I think going into this kind of game, I would definitely think Clemson would, and they would be like favored. At this point, we'd have Clemson at 11-2, LSU at 10-2. But what a fun matchup because LSU has, I mean, if we're being honest, they've out recruited Clemson, like in the past 4 years and beyond. And so a really great matchup of Clemson, who develops talent really, really well, and an LSU team who we bought a lot of stock in that we're betting on that talent that they've recruited and for them to have a turnaround season. And so for LSU, after winning the national championship and doing what they did last year, to get back to a New Year's Six Bowl and get back to the Peach Bowl would be an incredible bounce back year. Coach O could kind of get, people off his back and kind of settle back in and get back in the groove of doing things and getting back to where they're competing for national championships. For Clemson, I understand this would be a disappointing season, but for it to be your worst season in 4 years and you be sitting potentially with a New Year's Six Bowl win at 12 wins and that be your worst season in 4 years, I mean, that, again, you're where most programs wish they were. So we're expecting, again, an off year for Clemson at 12 wins, potentially 11 or 12 wins.
And this would be a rematch of them when they played for the national championship a couple years ago.
Little revenge game.
The battle of the two teams who claimed Death Valley.
Tigers.
Two Tigers. You got the
fight song, the same fight song.
Tiger Rag, right?
Yep.
You've got complete opposite teams when you think about it, programs and fan bases. You've got kind of squeaky clean Boy Scout Clemson. You got dirty, Cajun rice, LSU over here. So, it's very interesting. I love mixing these kinds of things together. And it is, like you said, the development versus, kind of the talent and the, get the guys in here. LSU kind of flies by the seat of their pants, I feel like, a lot of the times, and just relies on luck or black magic voodoo or something. And then Clemson, they've had coaches in place for 10 years, that are been working together. Venables, it's just these guys that aren't going anywhere. It's just crazy. Like LSU will fire people and just move on.
I mean, you talk about opposites. You got New Spring Church versus like Voodoo Magic. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. Oh, goodness. Why don't you talk us through our Fiesta Bowl matchup?
Yeah, so Fiesta Bowl is definitely one of my favorite teams in this year. And I think a team that would definitely be surprising to most people is Miami, is if they can win the ACC and end up here. They would be in the Orange Bowl if it was not already part of the playoff. So that's something that it would be cool for them to win the ACC and play in the Orange Bowl since that is at
Right.
home. But they're probably okay with going and playing just in a new venue as well. Um, but yeah, Miami versus Liberty. So that's the team that we think will be the best group of five school. Hugh Freeze with Malik Willis. Malik Willis is thought to be probably a top half of the first round quarterback. And Hugh Freeze is definitely continuing to really show out for, whoever ends up wanting to bring him back as in the Power Five ranks. He's just kind of taking his time. And I mean, he's really built a powerhouse as far as their level and their classification. So I think that would be a fun matchup, even if there were players, how we have people sit out for games and stuff like that, maybe meaningless games. You wouldn't fault maybe a Derek King for sitting out. Think about how he got injured in the bowl game last year. He could potentially say, okay, I've tried my luck, I've made it this far, and I still like Miami with their Jake Garcia quarterback. I think that they still have that talent. So that'd be still a lot of fun. I think this one's pretty cool.
Lastly, let's talk about the Rose Bowl, the granddaddy of them all. Historically a Pac-12 Big Ten matchup since it's not in the playoff this year. That's what we'll get. So our Pac-12 champion, USC Trojans, and our Big Ten runner-up, the Wisconsin Badgers. This will be a very fun matchup. Two great quarterbacks. I think one like elite defense in Wisconsin, an elite offense in USC, but Wisconsin has some really good offensive pieces and USC has some really good defensive pieces. So this will be a fun matchup, a really fun uniform matchup.
It'd be very classic looking. Yeah.
Very classic looking. I've gone back and forth with, I think the best uniform matchup would be if Wisconsin's the home team, USC's the away team. That's the good one. Anyway, I could go. I'm a uniform nerd. So a very fun Rose Bowl. So Daniel, we've talked about our playoff picks, the rest of our New Year's Six Bowls. Let's pick a national champion. So I, for work, went to Las Vegas about a month ago, and I've we pick games against the spread. We understand how the betting lines work, but you and I, we've never bet money on sports. So I was in Vegas, did it for the experience, but I'm not going to throw my money away. And I bet on two teams to win the national championship this year. And it's the two teams that we're going to pick to play for the national championship this year. And those two teams are Georgia and Ohio State. And this is like literally putting my money where my mouth is. I think these are the best two teams in the country at the end of this season. Very, very complete. These are the teams I think will meet for the national championship, especially given our matchups. I mean, give me your thoughts, Daniel, and then we'll reveal our champion here in just a second.
Yeah, so similar to what I said before, we talked about being complete teams and things of that nature. I think these two teams definitely embody that. And then they are two of those teams that we think could sustain injuries to quarterbacks. Not that we're necessarily counting on that. That doesn't happen frequently, but they could have injuries at different positions that are very valuable positions, and they have depth at those spots. So depth is the key. I think hunger is also a big key. Not that Alabama wouldn't be hungry because Saban has a really good way of starving his team, but I think that just after them having such a revenge year last year, there's Alabama, because everything runs through Alabama. The fact that they had the win last year, they don't typically win back-to-back. So I would say it's more likely that one of these other teams wins it. And you've got a young coach in Ryan Day who is ready to win his first championship as a head coach. You've got Kirby Smart, who that's all he's heard, especially after getting to the national championship and not winning it. So you've got two, I would think, very just hungry, talented teams. And so where both of those things are meeting is very important. So talent plus, will to win and, just that carrot dangling out there that neither coach has had. I think that's definitely a big, big factor.
So, yeah, like you said, two coaches who haven't won one yet, two head coaches that are early in their career at their first head coaching job, which is fun. Two staffs that have done an elite job in recruiting. It can't be understated what Kirby Smart and Ryan Day have come in and done on the recruiting trail. I mean, Kirby Smart came in and took Georgia's average recruiting from like a top 10 class to consistently a top 5 class. And really, I mean, only one team has beaten out Alabama for having the best recruiting class in the last decade, and it's Georgia, and they've done it twice. Ryan Day came in and out-recruited Urban Meyer, which is, I mean, Urban kind of brought this, him and Saban both, this like elite, fierce, recruit nonstop, recruit committed players, recruiting, get the best players in your team. You can figure it out later.
Right.
And the fact that Ryan Day it's not even arguable. In his first 3 recruiting cycles, he has out-recruited what Urban was doing at Ohio State. And so it's been dang impressive. These are elite rosters. And when it gets down to it, I think really one thing separates these teams. And I mean, if you run through, both have elite quarterback play. I think both teams by the end of the year are going to have really good offensive lines, but way better defensive lines. So those matchups are kind of a wash where I think the defensive line has the edge on both. I think both are going to have young, but secondaries are going to be put together, especially by the end of this season, young, talented secondaries. Georgia's older than you think. Their starters are going to be upperclassmen. And so beneath that, young guys in the secondary. One thing separates these two teams, and it's wide receivers. I think Georgia has a really good receiver room. Ohio State's is just the best in the country, and it's not close. When their threes go out there, like their threes would be a top 5 wide receiver room in the country. It's that impressive. It's ridiculous. And so at the end of the day, we're going to pick the Ohio State Buckeyes to win the national championship this year. We picked them to win last year before the season kind of went when COVID canceled the Big Ten, but we had picked Ohio State. We hadn't recorded it, but we were like, oh, dang, that's what we were going to pick. So we're getting a chance to rally back, pick Ohio State to win the national championship for the 2021 college football season.
I like it. I feel good about it.
I feel great about it. So 2 more things we got to pick. Coach of the year and the Heisman. This is pretty simple for me as far as I'll give you coach of the year. Coach of the year, who's our pick?
So, I mean, I think it's similar to what you're about to say, but, it's obvious when you look at these teams who made it to the playoff, what route did they take to get there. This is going to be voted on, after the conference championship week. So we have Georgia winning the SEC championship and winning it over Alabama and making the playoff. So it would seem that Kirby Smart would be the pick there. So we are going Kirby Smart for coach of the year this year.
Love it. For the Heisman Trophy, we're going to go with CJ Stroud. I know a wide receiver won it last year. I really wanted, when we started throwing around ideas, to pick Garrett Wilson. I think he's the best wide receiver in this room. I just think they're so deep. They're all going to be fresh. There's going to be players that go off for certain games in that wide receiver room. But the one consistent stat will be the quarterback throwing them the ball. And when you've got so many weapons at wide receiver to help you be successful, an offensive line that I think, again, this is an underrated offensive line. They're going to be really good. A running back room, it's better than last year with guys who can catch the ball out of the backfield. There's going to be one guy who's making all those stats happen, and that's CJ Stroud. And we know how lethal this offense can be. Going into the season, Ohio State's offense is ranked number 1 by SP+. I think that's a great projection for how this offense is going to finish the year.
And he's a good runner too. So
absolutely,
he's going to have those yards especially if their running game is strong with the backs that we expect them to take a little step forward. He's gonna rack up not only the yards but the touchdowns, and he's gonna it's gonna be tough to defend them because you're gonna have to pick one or the other, and they're gonna burn you with the other. So it's not gonna be easy.
Love it. To recap, our college football playoff: Georgia, Oklahoma, Ohio State, and Alabama. Our national champion pick, the Ohio State Buckeyes. Coach of the Year, Kirby Smart, and the Heisman Trophy winner, C.J. Stroud. Daniel, that finally wraps up our preseason picks, and we get to talk some real football next week. All of this
doesn't matter next week. It's over.
We're going to have 2 or 3 episodes next week. We're just getting excited. So we're going to do 2 picks episodes because we are pumped about these games, and there's too many of them to narrow down 7 games to pick. So we're going to do 2 picks episodes next week. So stay tuned. We're going to pick games against the spread, talk about all these games this opening weekend. And I just hope everyone listening get ready. We're going to have fun this football season. I'm so glad we're finally here. College football is back. Stadiums are back. Let's get back to normal. Renaissance year for college football. Daniel, I know we've been texting about it. I cannot be more excited for college football.
Do it.
Boom. Be sure to follow him on Twitter at Deep South Daniel. You can follow me on Twitter at Jacob Carnes with a K. And that will do it for this edition of The Extra Point. He is Daniel. I am Jacob. See ya.